Welcome back to the Thrifty Food Plan channel, friends. I am so glad you are here. Please do hit that like button and subscribe. So, you may have seen my recent videos sort of reflecting on my experience living in a tiny house up in the mountains. And one of the reflections that I had from that experience is we had back to back to back blizzards. And I came to understand in a very real way the importance of having like an emergency food supply. And so one of my reflections was that I really wanted to get real about having an emergency food supply. And many of you in your comments seconded the importance of having a stockpile of food to eat in case something happens, like a back to back to back blizzard. And that is what we're going to focus on today. All right, so there are some assumptions that I'm making, and I've got notes so I don't forget things. There are some assumptions that I'm making as I am thinking about putting an emergency food pantry together. So, assumption that I'm making is that I will have kind of some spices already in the pantry if there's an emergency, including salt and pepper. I am somewhat assuming that either electric or gas might be working. If neither of those things are working, I do have like a propane grill outside that I could cook on. If the electric is out, I'm assuming in an emergency situation, I would eat everything in my fridge that very first day and then eat as much as I can out of my freezer the next day because food will go bad within 4 hours in the fridge and within 24 hours in the freezer. So that, you know, in addition to whatever I might have in my emergency pantry, I should have a day or two of food just based on what's in the fridge if the power's out. So here are some of the guiding principles or tips I'm going to use to put my emergency pantry together. Tip number one is that I'm actually going to build it based on a meal plan. And that really is like a learning that I had from COVID because I just had like a bunch of miscellaneous stuff in my pantry during COVID, you know, and even when I did my pantry clean out a couple of weeks ago, right, I had like cans of Chipotle peppers, which I mean, I could use those to make something else, but they're not really a base item. Right. So as I'm putting my emergency food pantry together, I am really going to try to have a meal plan that I am building around. Tip number two, or principle number two that I'm going to use is that I'm only going to buy foods that I actually like. Again, during COVID, there were pantry items that I bought that I don't really like, and so they didn't get used, and some of them I even had to throw out if you watched that pantry clean out video a couple weeks ago. Third, I am going to make sure that I have a focus on fruits and vegetables. This is something I learned in the tiny house experience because while I had like beans and rice and pasta, I had like those kind of things, I did not have any canned fruit, and I didn't have any canned veg. And so want to make sure that I've got fruits and veg and that in particular I am eating something green at least once a day. So fruits and veg are going to be a focus. I learned that the hard way in the tiny house. Four, this is going to be an unusual principle or tip for me, but as I am building my emergency food pantry, I am going to count the calories. Now, calorie counting is not something that I do ever because folks in my family do have histories with disordered eating. And so I usually do not count calories ever. But as I am putting this meal plan together and this emergency food plan pantry together, I'm going to make sure that like the base amount of calories every day is at least 1,200 calories, and with snacks, get that up to at least 1,500 calories. So, which is, less than 2,000, which is the daily value I think the feds use. but given my lifestyle, and I mean, I'm 5'3", I weigh 125 pounds, I don't need 2,000 calories a day, right? So I am going to count calories when I'm putting this meal plan together for my emergency food pantry. Again, not something I do on the regular, but planning forward, I do want to make sure if there is an emergency that I'm getting enough to eat every day. Number 5, I'm going to try to make sure as I am building out the food pantry, the emergency food pantry, that there is some variation in the flavor profile. Again, this is something from the tiny house. I really ate beans and rice or pasta and beans like several days, and it didn't taste very good. So I want to make sure that I've got some variation in the flavor profile. Number 6, I do want to try to minimize cooking time, and that is in case the electric and or gas are out and I'm just using the propane grill outside. So to the extent that I can, I want to minimize the cooking time. I'm not going to be able to eliminate cooking altogether, but I do want to try to reduce the cooking time when I have that option. And then finally, I do, tip number 7, I do want to keep affordability in mind. And in this situation, I'm really going to go back and think about the average meal cost video that I did a couple months ago. I did a video about like, why do our grocery prices look different than what we see on YouTube? And part of that is because our food prices can vary a lot based on where we live. And so I'm going to be very mindful about sort of the average price per meal in order to keep this emergency food supply affordable. Now, 2 other things I want to say is that I'm building a 14-day emergency food supply plus whatever might be in my fridge or freezer and in my regular pantry. I know I heard from many of you that like 14 days is probably not enough, but that is what I'm going to start with. I'm going to start with a 14-day emergency food plan built around a meal plan. And I can build on that over time as I see things go on sale and that kind of thing. The other thing I would say, which is not really a tip, but I am going to make sure that I inventory sort of the best buy dates for everything so that I can rotate that through like my regular meal plan and replace things as I need to. And that'll help me, just if I pay attention, I can rotate out so I don't have items I have to throw away like I did last time when I did my pantry clean out. So there are at least 2 things that I haven't figured out about this yet. The first is water, right? And so like if an emergency happened and we had notice about it, I mean, I could do what I did when I was a little girl. When I was a little girl, I grew up in hurricane country or hurricane country, depending on how you say it. And when a hurricane was going to come through, like we filled up all the bathtubs with water. We filled up, all the cups in the house with water, jars with water. We always did that when we knew a hurricane was coming through. So if I have notice, I certainly would do that. But and like when I looked online about how much water I might need, I mean, it's a lot of water and I don't know where I'd store all of that if I bought it in plastic bottles. So I don't know, I'd appreciate y'all's tips and your thinking about like how to think about water, because some of the things that I want to cook do require water and you need water to live. So I just would appreciate any tips and tools y'all might have to help me think through how to deal with the water issue. Now, the other thing that I can't quite figure out is, some food items are going to need to remain cool or cold. And this is not going to be an issue if the emergency happens for me during the winter, because I can just stick stuff outside in most cases, right? The natural disaster that I'm probably most at risk for is a blizzard. And so I'll just stick food outside and it will stay cold. but I can't figure out, looking online, I can't figure out like an affordable way to keep food cold for 2 weeks. Like, I can't figure it out. Like, and if, I mean, I could buy a generator, I could buy a solar paneled connected cooler, but like that stuff's like $1,000. So if you all have tips or ideas to help me think through, if something happened in the summer and it was 90 degrees outside and my power's out, how am I going to keep my food cool? So I would appreciate your tips around that. And your tips kind of thinking through the water issue. I haven't quite figured that out yet either. So these are sort of my 7 principles or tips about how I'm going to build out this 14-day emergency food supply. I would appreciate, again, sort of your comments and help with the issue of water and keeping things cool. And then any other tips and tools of the trade that you feel like I should be thinking through. Thanks so much for visiting, and do come back on Thursday when I'll actually have a pantry haul, an emergency food pantry haul. See you Thursday.